He was thrown into a pit by his own brothers, left to die in the dark while they sat down to eat. They had torn off the coat their father had given him, the same coat that had made him their father's favorite. Now it was dipped in blood, and the lie was ready. What happened next would reshape an empire and test whether forgiveness could outlive betrayal. The story is preserved in the book of Genesis. It is one of the most tightly constructed narratives in ancient literature. A favored son, a pit, a sale, a false accusation, a prison. Then a throne. The arc is clear, but the weight of it, the years of silence, the moments when everything could have ended differently, is what makes it endure. The text does not give a year or a pharaoh's name. It gives a man, a family, and a chain of events that would shape a people for centuries. The account is preserved in Genesis. Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob, born in his father's old age. His mother was Rachel, the woman Jacob had worked 14 years to marry. That alone set him apart. Then came the dreams. Joseph dreamed that his brother's sheaves of grain bowed down to his. He dreamed that the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. He told his father. The brothers could not speak a word of peace to him. The favor, the dreams, the coat of many colors, it was too much. When Jacob sent Joseph out to find his brothers in the fields near Shechem, they saw their chance. They had already decided they would not let him rule over them. What they did next would haunt them for decades. They stripped him, threw him into an empty cistern with no water, and sat down to eat. When a caravan of Ishmaelite traders passed on its way to Egypt, Judah had an idea. Why kill him? Sell him. So they pulled Joseph out of the pit and sold him for 20 pieces of silver. They took the coat, killed the goat, and sent it back to their father stained with blood. Jacob refused to be comforted. He said he would go down to the grave mourning his son. And Joseph was on his way to Egypt, a slave. The dreams had not saved him. They had only made him a target. The caravan moved south. His brothers went home with a story they would have to keep. Neither side knew how the story would end. In Egypt, he was sold to Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Joseph proved himself. Potiphar put him in charge of his house and everything he owned. The text says the blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had. Then Potiphar's wife accused him. She had tried to seduce him. He had refused and fled, leaving his cloak in her hands. She used that cloak as evidence. Potiphar believed her. Joseph was sent to the king's prison. No trial is recorded. No one spoke up for him. Again, his fate turned on a piece of clothing and a lie. The man who had run a household now ran nothing. He had only the walls and the silence. There is no record of him protesting, no record of him naming his brothers. He simply endured. That patterned trust in the midst of ruin would define his entire path. In prison, he was put in charge of the other prisoners. Two of Pharaoh's officials, the cupbearer and the baker, had dreams. Joseph interpreted them. In 3 days, he said, the cupbearer would be restored, the baker would be executed. It happened exactly as he said. The text does not say what Joseph felt when the cupbearer walked out free. It only records what followed 2 more years. Joseph had asked the cupbearer to remember him. The cupbearer forgot. For 2 more years, Joseph stayed in that prison, with no promise that anyone would ever remember his name. The door that could have opened stayed closed. But that was not the end of the story. Pharaoh's dreams would change everything, and when they did, the man who had been forgotten would become the one the whole kingdom depended on. 2 years later, Pharaoh dreamed. 7 gaunt cows devoured 7 fat cows. 7 thin ears of grain devoured 7 full ears. He woke troubled. None of his wise men could interpret the dreams. Then the cupbearer remembered. There was a young Hebrew in the prison. He had interpreted dreams before. Pharaoh sent for Joseph. He was brought out, shaved, and dressed. When Pharaoh told him the dreams, Joseph did not take credit. He said the interpretation belonged to God. Then he spoke, 7 years of plenty were coming, then 7 years of famine so severe that the plenty would be forgotten. He advised Pharaoh to choose a discerning and wise man, store grain in the good years, and prepare. Pharaoh looked at him and said there was no one like him. He put his ring on Joseph's hand, dressed him in fine linen, gave him the 2nd chariot, and made him ruler over Egypt, second only to the throne. Joseph was 30 years old. The pit, the prison, and the silence of the cupbearer had led to this. The man who had been forgotten was now the one everyone would have to remember. He was given an Egyptian name and an Egyptian wife. He moved through the palace with authority, but the boy from Canaan was still there. And one day the past would walk back in through the door. The 7 years of plenty came. Joseph stored grain in the cities. Then the famine came as he had said. It spread beyond Egypt. People from every country came to buy grain. Among them were 10 men from Canaan, Joseph's brothers. They bowed low before him. They did not recognize him. He recognized them. The dreams had come true. The sheaves had bowed. The moment was real. What he would do at that moment would define the rest of his life. He spoke to them through an interpreter. He understood every word they said. They did not understand his. He accused them of being spies. They said they were honest men, 12 brothers, one no longer living, one the youngest, left with their father. Joseph demanded they bring the youngest to prove their story. He kept Simeon as a hostage and sent the rest back with grain, and with their silver secretly returned in their sacks. They were terrified. At home they found the silver and told their father everything. Jacob would not let Benjamin go. The grain ran out. Judah promised to bear the blame forever if anything happened to the boy. Jacob finally agreed. They went back to Egypt with Benjamin. What Joseph would do when he saw them again would change the family forever. He could have revealed himself at once. He could have had them arrested. He chose instead to test them, to see if they had changed, to see if the men who had sold a brother would now protect one. Joseph had them brought to his house. When he saw Benjamin, he had to leave the room to weep. He came back, feasted with them, and gave Benjamin 5 times the portion of the others. Then he had his silver cup hidden in Benjamin's sack. After they left, his steward overtook them and accused them of theft. The cup was found. They tore their clothes. They returned to the city and threw themselves before Joseph. Judah spoke. He told of their father's grief, of his own promise, and begged to be kept as a slave in Benjamin's place. The man who had once suggested selling Joseph now offered to take his brother's place. Joseph could no longer control himself. He sent everyone out. Then he wept so loudly that the household heard. He said, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers could not answer. They were terrified. He told them to come close. "I am your brother Joseph," he said, "the one you sold into Egypt. Do not be distressed. God sent me here before you to preserve life. You did not send me, God did. Go and bring my father. Tell him everything." Pharaoh gave them wagons and provision. Jacob, when he heard that Joseph was alive and ruling in Egypt, said, "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." The family gathered their flocks and their households and set out for Egypt. The same land that had received Joseph as a slave would now receive his family as guests of the crown. The irony was not lost. Nothing in the story had been wasted. The family came down to Egypt. Joseph met his father in Goshen. He fell on his neck and wept a long time. Jacob said, "Now I can die, since I have seen your face and know you are still alive." Pharaoh gave them the best of the land. Joseph provided for his father and his brothers and their households. Jacob lived 17 years in Egypt. When he was near death, he blessed Joseph's sons and his own. Then he died. Joseph had him embalmed and buried in Canaan, as his father had asked. After Jacob's death, the brothers were afraid. They thought Joseph would finally repay them. They sent a message. "Your father said before he died, 'Forgive your brothers.'" Joseph wept when they spoke to him. He said, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to save many lives." So he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph lived 110 years. He saw his great-grandchildren. Before he died, he told his brothers that God would come to them and bring them up out of Egypt to the land he had promised. He made them swear to carry his bones up with them when they left. So Joseph was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. The boy in the pit had become the man in the palace. The dreams had come true. The brothers had bowed. And in the end, the one they had sold did not destroy them. He saved them. The oath about his bones was kept. When the Israelites left Egypt generations later, they took Joseph's remains with them. He had never stopped pointing toward home. The narrative leaves him in the coffin, but the promise was already given. The story of Joseph does not end in Egypt. It ends in the belief that the same hand that had brought him from pit to palace would one day bring his people back to the land they had left. That is the final turn. Not revenge, not forgetfulness, but a mercy that outlived the pit, the prison, and the palace, and asked only to be remembered when the long road home began. If this story of betrayal, prison, and unexpected power stayed with you, like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the people and moments that shaped history. His story stands as a stark reminder. The same hands that cast you down can be the ones you later feed. Joseph never forgot the pit. He also never used his power to repay it. That tension between memory and mercy is what makes his journey from pit to palace one of the most enduring narratives of survival and grace in the ancient world. The text does not hide his tears. It does not hide their fear. It records both the betrayal and the refusal to return it. That is why the story still holds. From the cistern in Canaan to the coffin in Egypt, the arc of Joseph's life is clear. His brothers were guilty, yet he chose mercy over might. He did not use his dreams to crush, he used them to save. That is the thread that runs through his story and beyond. If you want more, like and subscribe. We release new documentaries every week.